Yeah, I'll start. This is the week 8 of the TA session of Design of Steel Structures taught by Professor Damodar Maiti. I am Trisha Chakraborty, one of the course teaching assistants. I am a PhD student at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. I will start with a brief recap of the previous 7 weeks. We started with looking at the two broad branches of structural engineering, analysis and design. Analysis is the forward problem where we are given the structural dimensions, the boundary conditions, and the applied load, and we have to find the response induced in the structure in the form of forces or stresses, deflections or strains, and so on. And design is the inverse problem where we are given the loads that we want our structure to withstand and some criteria on maximum deflections, and to then our goal is to find the optimum size of the structural elements. The first part, the loads to be withstood by the structure is commonly called the collapse limit state, and criteria on maximum deflection are called the serviceability limit state. Steel, we have previously looked at design of concrete structures, and steel. Why do we use steel at all? Since concrete is the most versatile material for construction, and majority of the buildings we see around us are made of concrete. But steel is much stronger than the conventional concrete. It has a high strength to weight ratio. That is, steel structures are therefore very lightweight, and steel is ductile compared to concrete. Ductility means that the material gives a lot of warning before actually collapsing, and that is a very important criteria in design. However, steel is much costlier than concrete, so we do not use it in everyday or less demanding structures like residential buildings, but we use in in bridges, in factory structures, and in towers, for example. And why do we need design is the components individually and the entire structure should withstand the load throughout its lifespan, satisfying the serviceability criteria. To properly design a structure, we have to ensure that it is economical to construct without compromising safety. This is known as cost effective design, and this requires a knowledge of the design procedure in detail. The mechanical properties of steel, there are some there are a lot of mechanical properties of a material, but there are five of them that the Indian Standard Code for Steel Design IS 800 2007 says that we can take these five properties at certain fixed values irrespective of the grade of the steel. The unit mass of steel or the density is 7850 kg per meter cube. The modulus of elasticity or the Young's modulus is 2 into 10 to the power 5 Newton per meter square, or 2 into 10 to the power 5 megapascal. The Poisson's ratio is zero point 0.3. The modulus of rigidity is 0.769 into 10 to the power 5 Newton per millimeter square, again megapascal. And the coefficient of thermal expansion is 12 into 10 to the power minus 6 per degree centigrade. This degree coefficient of thermal expansion is relevant more in case of steel than in case of concrete, because concrete has a very low coefficient of thermal expansion, but for steel it is not really that less in case of fires, etc., that are also taken into design considerations. This becomes a critical part of design. And the how we grade the define how we grade the steel, like define the grade of steel that is mentioned here irrespective of its grade, is by the yield stress Fy and the ultimate stress Fu. These are the principal mechanical properties of structural steel, and the yield stress and ultimate stress are got from the stress strain curve that we look at. Now, unlike concrete, where we use primarily square, rectangle, or circular sections of any dimension that we wish, that we get from design. In steel, we use certain predefined rolled steel sections that are established by the Bureau of Indian Standards (BIS), publishes a handbook, IS handbook number 1, which is also called the SP6 1, and they tabulate for corresponding to each of these sections. For example, this is an I section or a joist, this is a C section or a channel, an angle section, a T section. All of these will have certain, all these dimensions will be specified corresponding to one particular section, and a lot of its properties like weight per unit length, moment of inertia in two directions, the geometric dimensions, etc., and the distance of the center of gravity from this along this axis, around this axis. All of these will be mentioned that we can refer readily. These are some other sections. These are hollow sections: square, rectangle, circle, and these are some solid sections. They are square, circular. These are flats, and these are plates. Now, they generally have a much smaller dimension. That concrete square, concrete sections are always solid sections, and their dimensions are typically much higher than that of steel. Steel sections, we don't find 400 by 600 steel sections. And this is the stress strain of the elasticity curve of steel. It is obtained by taking a cylindrical specimen and applying a tensile force on its either end. This force is increased in steps and the force is noted down. From that we can get the stress at each step, and we use a device like a strain gauge maybe to find out the strain at each stage as well. So we can plot the stress strain curve. It looks like this. The points A is the limit of proportionality. It is the point where the linear nature of the stress graph ceases. B is the elastic limit from up to which the elastic behavior of the structure stays. That is, if we remove the force, the strain becomes zero again. But after B, there is some kind of permanent residual set of the strain. And C and D are the upper yield and the lower yield point. They are placed very close together, and they are generally considered as one point. And the stress corresponding that is the yield stress. And E is the ultimate or maximum tensile strength, and F is the fracture point. E is the stress corresponding to E is Fu, and the stress corresponding to C and D is Fy. They are generally for Fe 410, the Fy is 250 megapascal, and the Fu is 410. And some modes of failure are in steel structures are bending, local buckling. Today we are looking at compression members, so this buckling term will become important. uh, shear buckling, web crushing and buckling, lateral torsional buckling. These are the collapse limit states, and deflection is corresponds to the serviceability limit state. And buckling, as I've said before, buckling is important in steel structures and not so much in concrete structures, because steel structures are slender. Is one of its dimension is much higher compared to the cross section in the other perpendicular direction. And there are some this slenderness is defined by slenderness ratio that we will look at today. In design philosophies, we have looked at working stress and limit state method. In limit state method is what is mostly followed in the codes and what we follow. The design action must be less than the design strength. The design action is obtained by multiplying the working load with a factor greater than 1, like 1.1, 1.25. And the design strength is obtained by the actual strength of our section divided by a certain factor greater than 1. So that is, both of these are done to account for uncertainties in design that we cannot control, like in loadings, in geometry, in yield stress. All of this, the values that we take, we are saying that yield stress is 250, but it might not actually be 250 all the time. It can have certain variations. So to account for these, we there is a area called structural reliability that does research on and gives these factors that we are going to use in on the action and the strength. In connections, we have looked at two types: bolts and welds. Connections are relevant in steel structures again, not in concrete, because in steel structures the sections are brought ready-made from the industries and they have to be assembled, then they are not cast together. So, and connections are a very important part of the design, because they are often the weakest links. That before, when a steel structure collapses, often the connection is the one of the connections is what actually fails. So they have to be designed very cautiously. Plus they also make up a large amount of the cost of structural steel, so it is important from both the point of safety and economy. We have looked at bolts and welds, and now we move on to the topic of today, that is compression members. Compression last.
Ma'am,
Yes, yes.
yes, since you are moving on to compression members, I just will have small doubt in the tension members.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, we have seen examples in your previous class. You have given for bolt members like tension, strength of tensile area.
Yes,
So, okay, there is an example with respect to weld also, like
oh,
tension strength, tensile strength in respect to weld.
yes,
So,
yes,
in the particular section, we have three criteria. One is block shear, and one is critical, and another is the gross yielding area.
yes, yes,
So, in particularly when I speak to block shear, the value LC, there is something
yes,
called LC value.
yes, yes,
Okay, in the bolting, it was quite clear. It is like distance between the first bolt and and the last bolt.
yes,
That was
exactly.
pretty much clear.
Yes,
But in the weld thing, like if the weld is like throughout the perimeter of the some kind of the length of the member, so how should we calculate LC particularly? I'm a little confused. Like let's say if a small plate is attached to the gusset plate,
okay.
and we will and the weld will be like throughout the like C kind of shape.
Yes, yes, a
Let's
C
say in
kind
C.
of shape.
when they see kind of shape, how we should be considering the LC value?
Should the LC not be the perimeter of the entire this length plus this length plus this length?
That is what I'm not sure about it. I didn't get any reference even in the IS code. So is
Okay.
that right or not? I don't know. I was thinking only the perpendicular distance, like along the force of the length. I was thinking in that way, but I'm not sure we should be considered all the parameter or how it should be
Okay.
done.
So
LC value for welding.
was there no example in this the imperial normal lectures?
Uh, I think there is one. Actually, we are so much lagging behind what the present course is going on. So I was going to the lectures and I have written the question like this is there happened somewhere in that particular time. I don't remember what happened at that time, but I just wrote the question like LC in the
Okay.
welding is little different. So just
Okay.
clarifying that I
I see
just
what you
had in
mean.
that way.
So did you not find anything in the IS code at all? You have read it. I
Yes,
can't
I
find.
have seen it in briefly. I have seen it like particularly for properly for welding, sorry, bolting, but not for the welding. So yes,
Okay, so if it is not, it should be given in the IS code somewhere. Is one second. I'll just check once.
yes, sure, ma'am.
The block shear length TDB shall be checked for the welded end connections by taking an appropriate section in the member on the end weld, which can shear off as a block. Okay, so in case of bolts, we are taking one second. I'll open this as well.
Hmm.
So if there is a weld, the weld will be along this line completely.
Hmm. So we should consider LC as that perimeter.
I think that because if it shears off, the from what I'm imagining, if it shears off, the shear area will be the perimeter into the thickness. But I will confirm this. Okay, next class.
Huh,
I just
huh.
have to look through some books once, and I'll also write it down.
And also, I was going through my notebook. I think in week 5,
Okay.
class 23, I guess there is one problem actually. Yes, there is one problem. They have considered. Okay, maybe I will just share the
Yes.
screen for that
Yes.
particular.
I will
Give
share.
me a minute, ma'am. I found that lecture's PPT, but I didn't find particular that example. I will just go through 1 minute and I'll share the screen.
Okay. Okay. I'll wait then.
Yeah,
I'll also
yeah,
look in a minute.
sure, ma'am. Huh, okay, ma'am. I'm sharing the screen.
Okay.
Okay. Are you able to see the
Yes.
screen, ma'am?
Yes, I can see.
So, one second.
LC is 75 plus 75 by 2. Okay.
Sorry, I'm not this window. Sorry, yes, ma'am. Yeah, that is right, that is right. They have written the LC value 75 plus 75 by 2.
Show me the figure.
So, yes, one second. This is the figure. So, they have written a value of like parallel line, this
Okay.
both parallel lengths divided by 2.
Okay. I don't see any reason why they should divide it by 2.
Huh.
Okay, wait.
And they did not consider this value. I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
this one makes
Okay,
sense,
no,
like only this
this
one parts.
actually won't be under shear. Right, right. I was wrong. That
Huh.
part is not. That part is under tension. That is not under shear.
Yes. But anyway, but again, divided by 2 is like a little confusing why it is like that.
Hmm. Okay, I think 221, 21 second. I have found one question. 1 second. Will I share it again?
Sure, one second. I'll stop sharing. Sure.
So this question I found here. Here, this is a welded part, and they are asking for block shear. Gross area and shear is this is 120. So 120 into 2 into 10. That is what they are doing, and the net area and the block. This is actually understandable. This part, the
Hmm.
120
Hmm.
into 2 into 10 is a shear area, and 250 into 10 is the area and tension. And gross and net area will be same because there is no bolt hole diameter reduction.
Yes.
So this is
Yes.
what they have applied here, and the formulas are exactly the same the way we have done for bolted connection. This is what I think.
Actually, I think not in this particular thing. So when you're calculating, okay, the bottom part is the block shear strength.
Yes,
I think when we have the is this a plate or is this an angle, ma'am?
this is a
In the
plate.
example.
This is a plate.
Okay. In case of plate, I think we'll not get any this kind of thing. I guess the LC value will come only when there's some kind of shear like this.
Oh, okay. You mean that? Okay, okay. You mean the shear lag LC value? That
Yes,
okay, okay.
yes.
Sorry, I was thinking just the length in tension.
Huh.
This
In general, length intention, they have considered like what you're showing in that way, but only in the time of LC value, like for
okay
shear
here.
lag.
This is an angle. This is 150. The length of outstanding leg is 115. Weld length along the direction of load is 150 millimeter. So LC they're taking 150 millimeters. So one side there also they were doing the same thing, right? They were taking one part, like 75 by 75 plus 75 by 2 is 75. That
Yes,
there the angle was also placed like this, right?
yes, yes.
So they're taking just one end. Okay, I have to when it shears off. Okay, even I can't perceive why they're taking just this part.
Hmm.
I'll just look at it and let you know next class if I can find a
Sure, ma'am.
solution for it. For now,
Definitely,
just remember
definitely.
that we use LC as just one edge length up to this.
Okay.
But
Hmm. Hmm.
I know that it is not satisfying to just remember a method. We have to perceive it as well. So
Yes,
I will try to find an answer to this.
sure,
Okay.
ma'am. Okay. And one more small correction, ma'am. I think that is in. I mean, what was LC values coming? Not was in the block here. I guess it was in the critical section calculations, if I'm not wrong.
Oh, okay, okay.
C B tensile strength due to rupture of critical section. Beta in the beta value.
Okay, so the beta value of both are different. For what did we
Uh,
take for block shear and for rupture is different, right?
yes, I am saying that LC will not be anywhere in the block share. I got confused. I think there is no LC in block share. Only there is LC in the
Okay,
rupture critical strength.
okay, okay,
Huh.
okay. Yes, right. So, okay, I'll look at this and talk to you next class
Yes.
about it.
Yes. Sure. Sure. Sure.
And do you have any other question about tension members?
Nothing else, ma'am.
Okay. And did you get to know of the exam format?
I was not that much looking into the format. I guess mostly from assignments or something that way
Yes,
you'll get the
yes.
questions. I guess.
That's what, but
I,
some people last were asking about the format, and I don't know exactly like what kind of questions about negative marking, whether they will be MCQ or not. I don't know those, but the thing is that if you do the lectures and the assignment, the course should be done properly.
since it's undergraduate, I'm guessing mostly it will be like related to other questions in assignment or in the class. I think this the numericals will be little different. I think what you mentioned there will not be that much of out of the box kind of thing.
Yes, yes, no, and in
Definitely
fact,
inside the assignment.
and steel design is not a subject where you get a lot of out of the box things, because design is
Huh.
entirely based on guidelines given in the code. But analysis is where you can actually play around and give unexpected questions.
And one sentence you have mentioned that it actually this is true. Like what you said, like when we are doing analysis, there will be only one answer, but in the design we can expect multiple answers.
Yes, absolutely, because design is
But
completely up to the
I,
rationalization.
I mean, see, when you're taking the analysis, it depends. Like, see, in many situations, we had analysis. We have like already mentioned way, like approximate
Exactly.
kind of situations. But if you go for finite element and all, I think the values will be much differ. I guess.
Values will differ from what you mean.
I
FEM
mean, when you
analysis.
go for like, accurate methods like finite element analysis or something like that, there will be
Finite
some
element.
differences.
Yes, but finite element is not actually the accurate one. Okay, what we learned in a finite element is an approximation. In
Uh,
finite element, what we
acha.
do is you know that. I mean, you know the basic.
Yes, I am aware of basic of the
Okay,
finite element.
so what in finite element what we do is we assume that it is not a continuous. It is the structure
Hmm.
is not continuous. That we are discretizing it and we are only solving at the discrete points, and then the displacement or anything we are solving at the specific nodes, and then we are interpolating the displacement in between the elements. But what
Hmm.
what actual analysis, like accurate analysis, what we do is we have a governing differential equation, and that we solve. Like remember in the core structure analysis there was some method like Macaulay's double integration method. You would find the
Ha ha
differential
ha ha.
equation that is a continuous expression of y with respect to x. So there at every x you will get a perfectly accurate y. But for finite element you may not get that. In fact, you won't get that the more complicated the structure becomes.
Okay.
We
Right.
discretize it to reduce our, because everywhere the differential equation won't be easy to solve. Differential equations are very complicated, and to integrate it and get a proper closed form solution of y versus x won't be possible for most structures. That is why
But
finite element is.
in also in finite element, we will come to one kind of equation. I mean, when we're solving to the bottom part, we will come to some kind of equation, and we put the variable from where you're going from to where we required. I guess
In
that
finite
is also
element,
will be kind of in also I mean in most situations, in depending
yes,
on if you considering the shape and the shape
yes, this was shape functions,
only
but the
the
shape. But the shape functions are give only accurate result at the nodes. The whole point of finite element is that the accurate solutions are solved at the nodes, because the shape functions, you have a
hmm,
length beam of length L, and you suppose you divide it into two equal sections, two equal points members. Okay,
okay.
then there is a
Hmm,
node at the boundary. Suppose a cantilever beam. Then there is a node at the boundary. Then there is a node at the midpoint, and then there is a node at the tip.
hmm,
And
hmm.
the shape functions,
Okay.
and
Okay, they will give at the nodes only. Ha ha ha.
yes, the nodes,
Okay,
at the
I'm getting
nodes
the
there
point.
will be.
Hmm.
So, but at every point it is not going to give accurate one.
Okay, right.
And the more fine you make it, like if you divide it into two elements, the error will be greater. If you divide it into 100 elements or 1,000 elements, then
Hmm.
you will
Hmm.
find that it's almost for all practical purposes you are not getting any error. But that is again see, the entire point of engineering is a trade off, right? Between cost and within cost and safety, between the accuracy of the result and the time you are having to put into getting that result. That is why
True.
in research we make the infinite element. There's a area called convergence study, that when how you start with very big elements like coarse mesh, then you start making it smaller. You take smaller elements that increase the number of elements till you get a stable solution. After that, if you still further reduce the size of the elements, you won't get much variation, much more accuracy, but the time keeps on increasing.
Acha.
So
Mm-hmm.
that is another part of it. And the entire thing, the finite element, the entire thing is done to make calculations easier. You are in
Okay.
which year? You are in which year right now?
I actually completed my BTech. I was just going through a steel
Oh,
structure course actually.
okay, okay. So you would have done, of course, an FEM in your undergraduate.
Uh, Kind of crash course actually.
Okay, because it is not generally done in undergraduate. It's generally done as part of structural specialization MTech. It is an
Huh.
MTech course generally, but yeah, some people, some colleges do offer it for to undergraduates as well as an elective or something.
Maybe. But I did kind of an some institute or external institute crash course kind of thing, not in the
Not
in
in
our
your.
college.
Okay,
Huh.
okay. I see.
And one more thing, when you're talking about the connections, you mentioned like even concrete is like done monolithically, so there'll be not much of thing at the connections.
Yes.
What will be the situation for precast things? How do they have some connections for the connections, or was it also like not that
Yes, that's an interesting idea.
compared to steel?
That is an interesting idea, but still in concrete we do not use connections separately. But
Huh.
about precasting, I think what they will do in precasting is that this is a just an intuition based guess is that they,
Okay.
suppose a pile member has been precast and taken to the
Hmm.
site, and
Hmm.
then when they are casting the pile cap, they will
Hmm.
they will cast it in such a manner that there is some concrete that they are pouring is like the pile cap, and the pile is supposed to attach here, but I think they will increase the pile cap, that increase the depth of the pile cap in such a way that the part of the precast pile is inserted into it, and then it is cast in such a manner that some part of it actually what encapsulates some part of the
Hmm.
pile,
Hmm.
so that some kind of integrated casting is done. But there is one part that has been like, you understand what I'm saying.
Yes,
uh,
yes, I was able to little imagine about that.
yes, that's what I think, that because there are no explicit
Maybe
connections.
that, yes, what you said, maybe like even for that piles, extending the rebars in the piles into the what was the new casting of the pile cap.
Yes, yes, yes.
Maybe that will not give any issue since the river is like continuing into that particular thing.
No, but the rebar is not the only thing. I think because in concrete does have a decent compressive strength. Its tensile strength is, we ignore it. We consider that concrete has no strength in
Hmm.
tension, but we do
Hmm.
consider its compressive strength in pile calculation or in column design calculation. So I think that only the rebar strength won't work, because while we are calculating, we are assuming that the concrete is also taking the compression, and if there is no integrity, it won't take the force, it won't let the force transfer happen. It's the connections or the integrity that allows the force to be transferred from the pile cap to the piles, or from a beam to a column. So
Oh.
I think
Hmm.
that some part of it has to be cast in such a manner so that the pile gets integrated into the pile cap. But again,
Maybe,
it's a.
and maybe with respect to that, they will consider some kind of correction values like design, like what we
Yes,
consider the factors, I guess.
yes. If it had been cast
Might.
completely together, there would be more integrity. There would be some penalty factor for this, maybe.
Hmm.
Yeah, from
Yes,
undergraduate,
I
we
think we
actually
are
don't
going.
learn everything. All of this, everyone says that you have to spend 1 2 years in the site to actually get an idea that what we are learning in the undergraduate is just numbers and theory. But the real things you understand at the site when you are actually implementing those.
True, that is definitely true.
Okay, then I'll continue.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sure, definitely.
Compression members are the ones like that predominantly carries compressive forces on the two ends. An ideal compression member will be perfectly straight. It will have no crookedness. That is, again, this crookedness is related to buckling. The loads are applied uniformly across the section, and the center of gravity of the loads will coincide with the center of gravity of the member, which all of these don't actually happen in real members. This is just what we would call an ideal compression member. And some types of compression members are columns or posts that supports floors or girders. Steel beams are called girders. So columns, like the term we use in concrete. Steel columns also supports floors and beams in buildings, and they carry heavy loads. Struts are lightly loaded compression members used in trusses. They are usually of a smaller span. And booms are compression members of a crane. These are some pictures. You can understand that these are the columns and these are the girders. So this is a steel column. The when we now these you know that this is a 2D truss. Basically, truss is a 3D member, but we idealize them as 2D members, 2D structures. So when we solve the member forces of the truss, these members we will get the vertical members we will generally get as compression members. So these are the struts, and these are made of steel. And these kind of structures we would have seen in the cities at construction sites. These compression members are called booms. They are also steel structures. Design aspects of compression members. Stability plays an important role. This is related to buckling of the member. This is neither relevant in concrete structures nor in tension members that we have studied so far. The length of the member also governs design, unlike in tension members. In tension members, the length was nowhere in question. We would just be concerned about the critical cross section. The length of the member could be anything. But in compression member, that matters because slenderness ratio is defined based on whether the column is short, intermediate, or long. This the failure features depends on this length of column. If in a long column, due to the failure feature becomes like elastic buckling becomes a very important issue, and stress in the column will not exceed the proportional limit and is much lower than its limit. Long columns, this the the overall compressive strength is not as much an issue as buckling. For short columns fail due to yielding or crushing. We have seen some uh, criteria like web crushing and buckling, and axial shortening of the column occurs till it gets crushed. And for intermediate, due to inelastic buckling, yielding plus buckling, and flexural rigidity, EI changes continuously. This is another thing that so far we have, whatever the displacement in the structure was, we were not considering a change in its stress for that. Like if you pull, if we have a cylindrical member and we are pulling it, like we are applying a tension, and the cross section gets reduced for that. But when we are drawing the stress strain curve, we are using the original area, but actually due to the deformation, the area is getting reduced and the stress actually increases. But this we generally do not account for in our analysis, and this is called geometric nonlinearity. We generally consider structures to be geometrically linear, which means that the displacement deflection that occurs in the course of our loading does not affect the area or the geometric factors. But here in buckling, what happens is we have to consider that buckling is a completely geometrically non-linear phenomenon, and the structural rigidity EI changes continuously. For that, the extreme fiber reaches the yield point while stress in all other fibers remain elastic. This is where we would stop the design. We would not let the inelasticity enter the entire structure. Effective length is an important term for buckling. A compression member on buckling deflects in a shape of a curve depending on the types of end conditions of the column. End conditions are just what we talk as boundary conditions. They can be fixed, they can be hinged, they can be free. And in each compression member, there is a part which deflects as if the ends are hinged or pin jointed. And effective length, the ends of this, like suppose I have a member like this, and both ends are actually pin jointed, then under buckling it will show a quadratic kind of shape from end to end. But suppose the both ends are fixed, then it won't, because then we know that the rotation is not allowed at a fixed end, so it can't assume a shape like this, like this. If it is a fixed end, this is not possible because here the rotation has to be zero. So the bending starts at some point up away from here, and that is why the effective length comes into question. If both ends were hinged like this, and the entire effective length is 1L, the entire length is the effective length. But in any other combinations, like this is a fixed and roller, then there are fixed, all these are there, then there will be some effective length that is not equal to the actual length. So effective length, the ends of this portion of member, where in between there will be 2 points between which there will be a deflection as if those 2 points were pin jointed. So that portion is called though those points are called the points of contraflexion, and the distance between those points are called the effective length. End conditions are accounted for by using an effective length factor K. You multiply the actual length with this factor k to get the effective length L effective. So the factors affecting the effective length K are the amount of rotational restraints available at the ends of the compression member. This rotational restraint is important because that is why you see this part and this part behaving differently under buckling. Here, this is allowed to rotate freely, so it starts like this, and here it is a fixed end, so it buckles like this. And the resistance or the restraint available to lateral movement at the ends of the compression member also matters. Now, these are some examples. Like if both ends are if one end is restrained and the other end is free, like it's a fixed free, this is a cantilever beam, then the effective length is 2L. If it is a free and this is restrained, like see, this is the translation and rotation. The translation and rotation are mentioned separately here. Now, if one end is free and free in translation and restrained in rotation, it is some kind of boundary condition that we can't exactly perceive that translation is allowed but rotation is. I think this is that kind of this. If this is a structure like this the transition in this direction is free, but it cannot rotate. So this is that kind of boundary condition, and this is a hinged condition. We know that hinge boundary conditions does not allow translation, but it does allow rotation. So this also has effective length of 2L. Then there is a fixed beam where everything is fixed, like translation, rotation, everything is fixed at both ends. The effective length is 0.665L, and so on. I think these values should be given to you, or some of these you can remember. The cantilever beam is 2L, the hinge is 1L, and the fixed beam is 0.65L. Apart from this, these three are the commonest ones. Apart from this, if anything is answered in the question, the effective length will probably be mentioned. And there are some effective length of struts as well, which I don't think you have to remember, but will be given if you need it. This is how the slenderness ratio is defined. For the same area of cross section, as the length of the column increases, the tendency of the column to buckle increases and its load carrying capacity decreases. You can perceive it quite easily if you have a short member. The majority of the force will be transferred as compression from one end to other end. But if it is a very long member, that this is called a long member or slender member, then if you put forces at either ends, there's a tendency to buckle. So this tendency of a column to buckle is measured in terms of its slenderness ratio lambda, which is defined as a ratio of the effective length of the member to its appropriate radius of gyration. Now this slenderness ratio lambda is KL by R. K is the effective length factor. Yes, and R is a radius of gyration, and again the released radius of gyration is occurs when the column has equal unbraced length in both the axes with similar end condition about both the axes for a particular column section. This is a formula. Sigma, the lambda max is KL by R min, and the R min is the root over I min by A. I is the moment of inertia. So the minimum moment of inertia divided by the cross sectional area, taking the root of that, you will get R min, and you can just check the units. Moment of inertia has a unit of length to the power 4, and area has length to the power 2. So dividing that inside the root, you get a meter square or millimeter square term, and taking the root, you get a meter or millimeter. And moment of so basically, moment of inertia, we know that is area into r square in very simple terms. So this is some kind of analogous calculation. The slenderness ratio of a column should be kept as small as possible from economic point of view. For the same cross sectional area, the moment of inertia is the maximum when the material is farthest away from the centroid of the section. You know that from the definition of moment of inertia, it depends on the area and it also depends on the square of the distance. Thus, the section gets thinner as the length of the column increases, and ultimately, local buckling puts a check on the column size. Lateral support in a column decreases the unsupported length, and thus permitting the use of smaller sections for the same axial load. This is done in the case of steel structures. You may have noticed somewhere that in steel structures, if there is a very slender column, somewhere they will put, like at the midpoint or somewhere in the middle, they will put a lateral support in the form of two other members, so that the effective length of the column is broken. So if the column was of length, suppose 10 meter, no, 10 meter is too much, suppose 5 meter, then if you put a check somewhere in between, you could break it into 2 meter and 3 meters. Then the slenderness ratio of both parts will decrease, and both of them individually can take a much greater compressive force than the column as a whole could have taken. Sometimes the slenderness lateral sometimes the slenderness ratio is in the two different sections directions are defined as okay. There is also, it depends on y and z directions. Like if x is the direction along which the column is oriented, y and z is the plane of the cross sectional area. So they can be different because we know that the moment of inertia is different in two directions. Those steel sections which give two different values of standardized ratio in two directions should be so selected and fixed in a structure that the difference between the two slenderness ratio is minimum. And these lambda have some specifications. Tension member prone to reversal of stresses as 180. This these are some values that you will remember automatically when you solve a lot of problems or get into the industry mostly. Compression flange of beam restrained against lateral torsional buckling has 300. You would have encountered this if you did problems. Types of buckling: flexural buckling, also called Euler buckling, where elastic behavior predominates. Then there is a term called torsional buckling that occurs due to bending, where sections get displaced from their original positions by translation without rotation. And flexural torsional buckling is a combination of both of these two. Now we look at the design strength of axially loaded compression member. Torsional buckling does not produce a limit state, since either elastic or inelastic axial buckling limit state will occur at a much lower load. This is a practical consideration. Like in theory, torsional buckling may occur, but we do not consider it here because from experience we know that elastic or inelastic axial buckling limit will be much lesser. An analogous situation is that in concrete design we know that flexion is what mostly governs the design. We know that the shear stress won't be reached, the flexural stress will be reached much before at a loading state than the shear stress will be reached. So flexion is what we mostly consider for design of a column, for a concrete section. But sections like angle, T and channel, which do not have any appreciable torsional buckling stability, buckle torsionally before elastic or inelastic limit states are reached. And this is the first is we are working for axially loaded compression member. For steel with yield stress other than 250 Newton per millimeter square, table 8 and 9 of IS 200 2007, IS 800 2007 can be referred for stress reduction factor and design compressive stress. This is a procedure for design of actually loaded compression members. There are some assumptions. The ideal column is assumed to be absolutely straight with no initial crooked net, which is in fact a purely hypothetical situation and never occurs in practice. The modulus of elasticity is assumed to be constant in a built-up column. Certain types of secondary stresses, which may be of the order of 25 to 40% of primary stresses, are completely ignored. There are two unknowns, and it is required to assume one and calculate the other. For the design procedure, step 1, for an average column of height 3 meter to 5 meter, the slenderness ratio lies between 40 and 60. For a slender column, a little higher value than 60 is assumed. For column with heavily factored load, a small value of slenderness ratio is assumed. Now why is this term assumption coming? Because when we are designing, we don't actually know our cross section. We are given a height, we are given because the height will be fixed, right? Because that is, if you are designing a column, the height will be given from the floor to floor length or between two certain parameters, two certain points. But the cross section area we haven't fixed so far. It is the purpose of design to fix the cross sectional area, so we have to assume a slenderness ratio to begin with. For the assumed value of slenderness ratio, the design compressive stress for that particular value is determined from the table in IS 800. And then the step 2 is the cross sectional area is required to carry the factor compressive load, axial compressive load. We calculate that because we have an assumed compressive strength stress of that. This assumed compressive strength depends on the slenderness ratio. So we are given a steel grade, we know its compressive stress, but then we have to assume a slenderness ratio because we want to know the assumed compressive stress or the modified one. Because unlike in tension members where we take the tensile stress equal to the yield stress of the structure, all the ultimate stress as per the formula, here we need as a different modified compressive stress which we don't know from the beginning because we don't know the section and we don't know the slenderness ratio. So the procedure is this, that we assume a slenderness ratio. According to that, we take a modified compressive stress, and then we know the factored load that we want the compressive member to take. So dividing this pu by the assumed compressive stress, we get an approximate area that we require. Then we select a suitable section which has an area about 20% more than the area we require here. The section is so chosen that the minimum radius of gyration is selected. The minimum radius of gyration is as large as possible. This appropriate least radius of gyration is recorded. Then then we know the end connections. Okay, the boundary conditions are always mentioned from before, so we know the boundary conditions and we can find the effective length of the member because the length is given. Then we determine the actual standardized ratio, which must be less than the permissible standardized ratio, and hence the design compressive strength is computed again. So basically this is a circular procedure, cyclic procedure. I'll go into an example to make it more clear. Determine the design axial load carrying capacity of a column of ISHB. Okay, this is a forward problem again. This here the section is given and we are finding the compressive strength. So for Fe 410, we know these values. The column is pinned at both ends, so we know that the effective length is the same as the actual length. So the KL is 3 meter. For IS HB 300, these are from the. I won't go into the IS handbook thing again because I've shown it before. Okay, maybe I will once more. ISHB 300. This is the one at the rate 577. So I think this is what we are looking at. I don't know why this is 588, there is 577. So all the dimensions will be written here: 300, 250, 10.6, then 10.6. These are, and this area, all of these will be mentioned in the code itself. We don't have to calculate, and we don't know the exact shape either. See the area. Okay, this is the sectional area, 74.885 centimeter square. So 7485 millimeter square is what it is in what units we are using. So H by BF is 1.2 and TF is less than 100 millimeter from table 10 of IS 800 2007 or table 5. Okay, I'll look at this as well. This is a table. This is the rolled I section. So here there are certain criteria written that if H by B, this height divided by the thickness of the flange is greater than 1.2 and the TF is between 40 and 100 like it is here. The buckling class is B and C. Yes, so the R minimum is the RYY, that is 54.1 millimeter. This, I think this stipulation should be given in the code itself, and this is the effective FCC is pi square E by this standardness ratio square. The non-dimensional effective standardized ratio is Fy divided by FCC. Fy is, this is where we are finding out the effective compressive strength that is getting modified due to the slenderness ratio. So 250 divided by this value, we are getting this. For buckling class B, there will be an imperfection factor. These will be, you are not supposed to remember these. These will be given in the code, and the design compressive stress FCD is got by this formula. So this is 227, that is less than 250, that is the actual that is the actual yield stress of the material, and the design compressive stress of the column will be, you know that you have this area and you have a modified compressive stress. So by multiplying the area and the stress, you will get a force, and this is the design compressive stress. And the working compressive load, we won't allow it to go up to this. There is a factor of safety up to be applied 1.5. So 935 is the working compressive load. So working design, the design load is always the working design load is the working multiplied by the factor of safety. So the working is the design load divided by the factor of safety. You can understand that because design is what we got as the actual allowable, as what the my column section can actually take. But in working conditions, I won't let it reach its maximum capacity, so I will allow only a lesser one factored by divided by 1.5. This is what the whole point of limit state design is. This is a
One small thing.
yes.
Yeah, yes, PD value. So that is like PD. What we call that one? It's like paired structure buckles. Can you say in that way?
What did you
Compressive
say?
strength. I mean, PD. What is compressive stress? Or compressive strength? Or
Yes, yes.
PD. What we are
CD
showing
is a
in as
design
an
compressive
MWT.
stress.
So
The
can we
design,
design compressive stress?
yes.
So can we say that is like where it starts to buckle?
See, it is not where it starts to buckle, because all these formula that you see, all these empirical formulas, they are
Mm-hmm.
on all of these we basically start putting some kind of factor of safety. We round it on the safer side. So you can say that the design compressive stress is where we would expect the material to buckle, but it would probably not actually buckle at this stress. But this is up to which I will allow for it not to buckle. If I'm designing against buckling, this is where FCD is up to where I would allow it.
Okay, I mean, if we want to just compare with the Euler's column buckling load, like pi square EI by L square,
Yes, yes.
so how we should compare it? Like, what was that
See,
and what was this?
see,
This is like
basically,
design strength, but
yes, yes. What you're saying is right, but Euler's buckling load, basically, this is such a complicated cross section that in Euler's buckling, we consider a simple whatever theory we have learned, we consider a very simple cross section, right? For a cross section like
yes,
this, we won't be actually be able to find this out analytically, like from whatever knowledge we have. So all these calculations that are being done, determining the buckling class, then uh, taking the imperfection factor, this imperfection factor are based on the cross section. So all of these add up to give a compressive stress up to which we can say that okay, that at this stress for this cross section the section will buckle. But from Euler's buckling theory, I don't think you can find out this. The theoretically, I don't think it is possible to actually find out theoretically from the basic Euler's buckling knowledge that we have of a cross section like this. Do you get
okay.
what I'm
Then I
saying?
mean, if we consider yes, then in case if you are calculating in this procedure, if you're calculating for a hollow rectangular section or or a solid rectangular section,
Yes,
then
yes.
in case will it be near to the Euler's buckling formula?
I think it should be. I don't think it will be exactly same though. I think the
Uh,
you will find that
mm,
the design compressive stress will be lesser than what you get in from the Euler's buckling formula.
yes, yes, yes. But in
Have you ever
comparison, can
tried?
we say it will be nearer to the
Yes.
when the less complicated section we are if you are calculating?
See, actually, I can't. I don't think they have a relation exactly with whether it is complicated or less complicated.
Acha.
But for when it is a non when it is a section that we can actually deal with using Euler's theory, it is an interesting exercise actually to see if it exactly matches. If this exactly matches, if that exactly matches the compressive stress that we get from the code, then these are also probably completely accurate. But there has been a lot of calculations behind that we cannot see.
Yes, true, ma'am.
I'll,
This procedure,
I'll
particular guessing, I think there are so many factors involved.
yes, yes, so many factors. Wait, I'll also write
Uh,
this down. Yes, I think for rectangular section probably it should match. It will probably match. But I will look and I will try. I will calculate it and see.
Yes, sure.
Okay. Uh, do you have any other doubt for compression members?
No, ma'am, nothing else.
Okay, then since you are the only one in the class, I'll end the class. I think mostly it's covered. And next class, I will look at batten and lacing members, laced columns. Okay.
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
Okay then.
Ma'am, small request. Will it be
Yes.
possible to cut the part where we talked about uh, other topics? Like we went to finite elemental analysis and we are comparing the analysis methods and all. Will be fine if we just
If
since you're
we,
going to upload in YouTube, will it be fine to upload this whole thing, or will should be cropped out?
I didn't understand what you're saying. Like during uploading.
Yes, during the uploading. Will it be, I mean, we talked about most out of the box kind of thing.
Yes,
So
but I don't think
when
it
someone
matters.
is referring, will they find any uncomfortable or
No, no, no. I don't
anything
think
uncomfortable?
it's just an like a detour from this course.
Huh.
But finite element is an important part of structural design. So like structural engineering. So there is no problem. There is no issue with that. Absolutely no issue.
Okay. Then fine.
Okay.
Then definitely. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for attending. I'll end the class then.
Yes.